what's up, everybody? As I, Chris Collinsworth, slide into your frame, this is Kenton Hornbeck, joined alongside Logan Decker, once again for the BeckDeck podcast. We're currently braving the Siberian wilderness as snow caves in through our windows. Logan's down there in the Carolinas, which is getting hit with a Game of Thrones-style snowstorm. Logan, are you holed in your home right now? Have you been able to leave and get food?
Yeah, so I went out yesterday before some of the snow hit, because a lot of it hit around, let's say noon-ish, and it kind of piled on for hours. We had about 4 inches of snow last night, and it hasn't snowed anymore, which does not sound a lot. It's honestly not, but when I kid you not, they are not prepared in the Carolinas for any type of snow, ice-related weather. It's just like, all right, we got a layer. Let's hope the sun melts it down. And in terms of temp, like I said, it's nowhere near Cincinnati or even further up north. But we've had lows of 4 degrees, and we haven't been able to break over 32 degrees for the past couple days. So it's not melting right now. But we're good. We're fine. No issues on my end. How's the snow been for you? Because I've heard Cincinnati area has been getting pelted again.
Yeah, our big snow was last week. I live in Covington, and I park right on the street. The snow trucks have come and created a snow ice wall, essentially, for me to dig out of. Because I was parked in the street, they've come through and pushed all of the snow up against my car, creating, and then it got sunny, melted. It's like this big ice sheet on the edge of my car, which has been super annoying to deal with because I had to go on my lunch break and take, not a pickaxe, but take my shovel and just get it out of there so it's able to move so I can actually go do things that are part of my normal schedule. It's been pretty cold here. I'd say that's the through line. Very, very cold. 20 to even sometimes 5-degree weather in that range. But I've been rocking no socks and Birkenstocks the entire time because I'm one of those kind of white boys. I like my feet in the cold. As long as they don't get wet and I'm not stuck, it wakes me up. I've actually, as I've gotten older, enjoyed the cold a lot more. I don't love it. I'm not going to sit here and say I want it to be cold all the time. That would be a lie. But I do appreciate a good cold day here and there. And back in college, I just used to wear flip-flops in the snow, and I guess I've just continued on doing that. But yeah, it's I'm ready for the leftover snow to not be on the ground anymore. I don't really mind it being 20 to 35 degrees ranging in there. That's whatever. But I am ready for the snow to go away because pulling up on the street's been super annoying, and people driving has been super annoying. People still drive like assholes in the snow around here, and I'm sure they do down there too.
Oh, they don't know how to drive. It's one of those where if you're going to go out, it be a short trip, because I'm not even concerned about the roads. I'm just concerned about other people. On a side note, I do have to mention 2 things you just said. When you are bringing out your pickaxe to chisel away at your car, good Minecraft sounds. That was very good. I think some people might really enjoy that. And then the fact that you are a lunatic having, in college wearing sandals and probably shorts and whatever, walking around trying to prove you're the toughest guy on campus. No, I could never be that guy. I'm bundled up layers and I'll still bitch about it. So
I'm that kind of white boy, dude. I've seen all of these memes that these guys are crazy. They go out there and shovel their driveway in shorts and sandals. And it's yeah, why not? I mean, and I'm not going to sit here and act like I was shoveling the road or in the sidewalk around my house in shorts and sandals. I'm not. These trips that I was making, I'll explain it this way in totality. People are you're crazy for doing this and that, and that's fine. But really, what am I doing? I'm gonna walk down, get in my car. You're not actually in the cold that long. You're just kind of braving it for a couple minutes or whatever. Now I walk around to work and or not to work, but like around my neighborhood and stuff in my socks and sandals. We walk to the bar, or not socks, in my feet and sandals. So I walk there in my socks. Just that would be psychopathic. I think somebody would need to call the police and have them arrest me if I was doing that.
Yeah, socks and sandals are a bold move. I mean, we did a lot in high school with like the slides, but I mean, I can't pull that shit off now. First off, no white socks for me. I've only got black socks, but I can imagine Kenton walking around in Covington and the long ass white tube socks, wearing some older Nike slides, walking around in a jacket, wearing some Colts freaking attired like basketball shorts. Like, it's not even cold, man. Just go walking down to the bar. It's gonna take 2 minutes. And I'm sitting there like shivering in my 3 layers. Like, fuck this, man. It's gonna take me 20 minutes to warm back up.
Here's my my Kenton uniform for the winter. I swear to God, it is my Carhartt like coat, right? So I do have some thick protective layers to cut the wind. Some Gymshark shorts, probably like a hoodie or something underneath the coat, and then no socks and Birkenstocks, and then my iconic white Carhartt hat. That's usually what I'm walking around in, like just day to day, not at work or anything, but like in general. That's my uniform, and it served me good so far. I've never gotten sick in the winter yet, so I'll knock on wood. But I enjoy it. I enjoy the cold a little bit. It wakes me up. It's kind of like the cold plunge or the ice bath thing, putting cold water in your face in the morning. It's kind of like, boom, shock to your system. Like, let's get after it. I don't really like putting cold water on my face, but the sandals is my way of kind of like, let's stay locked in, like stay on top of it kind of thing. Get your blood running a little bit.
And this is for some viewers that don't know. Kent does a really good job with, better than mine, in terms of the lighting. I promise that this man is one shade away from a paper towel. I know I am also don't have a lot of room to talk, but let's just say if me and Kenton were both sitting in the room and we both get mad, Kenton is actually turning red in the face, and I haven't changed color tone whatsoever. So that's where we're at. So if you want to sit here and say, oh, yeah, Kenton is built different, I'm like, no, he's just got the strong Scandinavian bloodline where dude can just build an igloo and be completely fine and happy with it.
I agree. Thank you so much for saying that. And what we call that in my family is being a chalk boy. So I'm going to out ourselves. I am a chalk boy. Yes, it looks a little yellow. I got a yellow light here kind of on my face. But, yeah, Logan is correct. In general, I am very pasty, very, very white. It's not even like, there's different shades of this. It's like there's some people who sit in like a cave in their house and play video games all day, and then they get that kind of like flushed white. I could never do that. Like, this is just I am just a cracker.
You're just part of a day walker, that's all.
That's
You're
right.
only a couple steps away.
That's right. But we're here to talk today in the podcast, some more coaching hires, and then we're going to get down to putting on our GM hats and cosplaying as the Colts and Titans GM, a couple moves that we would make. But we're going to start off because, Logan, I know that as much as I hate to admit it, I think the Tennessee Titans did a good job in their coaching search, and they've hired 2 really solid dudes who I think, from my perspective, had poor first go-arounds for head coaching roles, but they were also in the 2 New York franchises that are completely cooked. So go ahead and take it away on your perspective on the Tennessee Titans coaching hires.
And I've said this on a previous pod. I liked the Robert Saleh hire. I wasn't say concerned, but I was like, let's see who they pair him up with as an offensive coordinator. And in my opinion, they got the best possible offensive coordinator on the market this year with Brian Daboll. I am ecstatic with this combination of hires where it's Daboll did. He was with obviously the Bills organization when Josh Allen was really getting taken off, so he gets credited with a lot of that development. I'm sure it's not only him, but Daboll. The question has never been, even with the Giants, is that can he run an offense? It's no, that's his strong point. If we remember, and I'm having a brain fart here with in terms of the gentleman who is the head coach prior to the Giants. It was somebody from a former New England regime, but that gentleman, and this is going to bother me the whole time, could not call an offense to save his life. He was a special teams guru over in New England before that all fell apart. And feel free to throw a name out if you know exactly who I'm talking about. And then Saleh, I think this is only credit. So, I'm talking about the Titans, but the Jets have been in the news this week about their head coach and all of their firings of assistant coaches with Aaron Glenn. And when Robert Saleh left the Jets, you notice that the organization, that their defense had just dropped in terms of production. This was before all the trades where they got rid of Williams, before they got rid of Sauce Gardner. Saleh can call the defense. Daboll can call the offense. This was the perfect combination, and I'm so excited for it just because of we have seen in the past, especially the past decade, a lot of coaches who had their first go around as a head coach, maybe it didn't go so well, and then their second go around, it's went a lot better. And I could mention that, whether it's an old dog like Mike McCarthy, he did have success in Dallas. We can talk about the playoffs, but having 2 to 3 years of 12-plus win seasons, that's fantastic. Dallas fans have not seen that for a long time. You have our former head coach, Mike Vrabel, who has turn the Patriots back into a nightmare for the rest of the AFC. He's a fantastic coach. One, I'm mad that we let go, but I'm happy that he's having success. Even Dan Quinn, I would say, this season wasn't ideal for Washington, but you can see just the difference in, the terms of the talent of the team, the leadership, how they played last year. You could make the argument that last year was a fluke. I think this year was a fluke where it's like, I think Washington has these solid pieces set up, and Dan Quinn, is one of those guys that got a second chance and showed that he's learned from his mistakes. And I think the same's going to come from Saleh. The same's going to come from Daboll. Daboll, I know for a fact, is he's going to use this time to be like, hey, I'm going to cement my resume in here because I got credited for development of Josh Allen. Now, he's going to get the same chance to do this with Cam Ward. I'm excited for that, especially when he was still the head coach of the Giants, and you probably saw this report, is that the Giants reached out to the Titans previous to last year's draft and offered a haul for the number 1 overall pick because they wanted Cam Ward. It was like multiple firsts, a second, third. It was basically like 5 picks in total that they'd offered, and the Titans had turned it down. Well, Daboll gets to work with the guy that he wanted to in the draft. I'm very, very excited about this combination. I've already talked about Robert Saleh in extent, but Daboll he's been coaching since 1997. And what I always find interesting is that when you go look up these guys and say, let's look at the history of this. And him and Saleh do already have some ties. I had mentioned in the past that Saleh had links to Michigan State, William and Mary. Guess what? Daboll's first 2 jobs, William and Mary, Michigan State. He got started in the NFL at New England, worked with the Jets, worked with Browns, Dolphins, Kansas City. He went back to college with Alabama. He came in with Buffalo Bills from 2018 to 21. That was probably the most notable jump in his career that I think we could say in recent memory. And then he obviously went with the Giants. And we all know he did have success with the Giants there. That was the year that Daniel Jones kind of put the organization under the knife and said, hey, I had a phenomenal year. I led us to a playoff win. And they had to pay the guy. And after that, injuries kind of dismantled their roster. But I'm very, very excited to see what this combination can do between, and we'll discuss this a little bit later in the pod as well, with all the factors coming in for the Titans this year into this next season. I am the most optimistic I've been about this organization since we blew up the number one overall seed to the Bengals in the playoffs. That's how long it's been since I've had this much optimism in our organization and our team.
I really like the coaching hires from Tennessee's perspective because they really needed some type of aspirational stability. Brian Callahan, his floor was super low. I remember I believe he coached the Raiders at one point in the late 2000s. Let me check that. It doesn't really matter. He's a failed head coach. He was not very good. He was largely a product of the Bengals' success in the early 2020s when they were going to the Super Bowl. Joe Burrow and to a certain extent Zach Taylor got him the job in Tennessee, and I never really felt like I'll put it this way, folks. As a Colts fan who roots on the Titans to be mediocre to not very good every year, who roots for that, I was pretty excited for them to hire Brian Callahan because I thought, I'm like, this isn't what the franchise needs. And lo and behold, my hunch was proven correct. Now, I think Robert Saleh is a very good coach. I think he's a leader of men. I think he is a defensive floor raiser. And his schemes consistently work in the NFL. Why it didn't work in New York, besides the fact that it was the New York Jets, is they could never really figure it out on offense. Year one, Aaron Rodgers goes down with an injury. Zach Wilson, he's not a very good player. He had to roll with Zach Wilson, and he was kind of in an unprecedented situation. I think if Robert Saleh had a normal quarterback situation in New York, the Jets probably wouldn't be nearly as bad in his first year under him, in my opinion.
I mean, the Aaron Rodgers Achilles tear 4 plays into the game is probably one of the biggest what ifs in, you could argue, our lifetimes in terms of that. For all we know, if he would have stayed healthy and done anything like we thought he would have, Saleh may still be the head coach for the Jets at this point.
Right, and I totally agree with that, and I think that because, of course, the Jets get rid of him, they wanted to move off of it. The situation had gotten toxic, but I do think they hired the right guy, and the situation just didn't lend itself to being successful because of the kind of the circus of the Jets and Aaron Rodgers and everything that was going on. He needed a fresh start, goes back to San Francisco, does really well there. Now he's in Tennessee where he can really mold the organization, and Tennessee is going to give you a longer leash than some other teams would. I know Brian Callahan arguably had a longer leash than he probably should have. So with him there stabilizing the defense, and then you get a good coach like Brian Daboll, who I do think is a good coach. And actually, last year with Jackson Dart, there were times you were like, wow, they're like, this is kind of working out. But I think the Giants ownership and Joe Shane in the front office ultimately decided it was time to move in another direction, kind of wash their hands of the Brian Daboll era there in New York. But he did have some success in a pretty myopic situation there in New York. So to bring these two guys together who were kind of cast-offs of the New York football scene, which is horrible. It's arguably, the worst in pro sports besides like Cleveland or whatever. To team those guys up, offense, defense, both of them have head coaching experience. Both of them know how to look at an organization and think, this is not how you're supposed to do it. Giants, Jets, do whatever they're not doing. You're getting a long leash in Tennessee. To me, it just lends itself to optimism, being a successful situation. Cam Ward, I think, is going to get a really good mentor in Brian Daboll. We forget that sometimes that Brian Daboll was actually the guy who ushered in Josh Allen's career years and really brought Josh to the forefront of the NFL's MVP race and being considered one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Brian Daboll had a lot to do with that. Cam Ward's going to have a really good opportunity in front of him because with Daboll's development skills, and he did that a little bit with Jackson Dart last year too, with his development skills, I think Cam Ward is willing to put in the work. I think he is a franchise quarterback. I do believe that. Last year he was playing a little bit of hero ball with Tennessee, but I think once he gets structure and system around him, he's got the mentality, the gumption to put in the work, and that's why I am bullish on Cam Ward working out long term. And he doesn't play football, but say he kind of plays backyard football a little bit, but I do think Cam Ward, if Daboll sat him down solid and like, look, Cam, we got to clean this up, this up, this up, I think he's like, done. Let's do it. I want to win. That's all I care about. Kind of like Kobe Bryant type mentality. I think it's going to work out for him. It's not great for me as a Colts fan because we're still sifting through the uncharted waters of our quarterback situation. And now Tennessee is seemingly wised up and got their situation on even ground. And Jacksonville's obviously still pretty good, and Houston's still pretty good. So with all of that being said, I like the hire for the Titans, and as a Colts fan, I'm a little disappointed that now the franchise seems to be competent.
Yeah, looking back and put it in perspective on, let's just say a month ago when we're like, who are we going to hire? Who are we going to fill this spot? And you see all the names floating around. And looking at it now when it's the puzzle pieces have been set, I could not be any happier with the combination of coaches that we got. I wouldn't change a thing. This feels really good that the organization made moves that honestly made sense. It's especially from the Callahan. I had lost quite a bit of faith with our general management and the owner, and just to see them make this turnaround, make a relatively, I'll say, quick decision, because you are correct when they're saying that, when you've said that Brian Callahan had a long leash, but he only coached for basically a year and a half. That was too long. That was way too long. You could watch this team be dead, on arrival, basically week 2 of this season. He needed to be gone. I'm happy he's gone. Better duo combination brought in. And it does feel like, and you had mentioned, it's like, hey, Houston's had a phenomenal coaching staff in there with DeMarco Ryans, and with the Jaguars bringing in Cohen. That has been a fantastic hire so far. And, it's funny that, let's say 2 to 3 years ago, the Colts were praised on Steichen, but you could potentially make the argument between the Colts, the Jags, and the Texans that the team that has shown, I don't want to say the least or the weakest, but you can make the argument that the Colts might have the weakest coaching staff out of this division, if you are excluding the Titans at this moment, or the previous couple years. And I'm not saying that in a negative way, because I do like Shane Steichen. I think he has shown that he is a good coach. It's just, I think the Colts are really good at a couple things, and it just so happens that the Texans and the Jaguars are elite at a couple things, and that definitely helps the coach look better. That's for sure. That being said, I don't want to continue to do a deep dive on the Titans. I want to pivot a little bit. I just want to mention this, is that last time we had talked about the Bills and who they would potentially hire, and of course a day or two after our last pod, they go ahead and hire Joe Brady, which in the Titans moves, it was very inspiring. You felt great. In the Bills moves, it's the exact opposite. So I want to get your reaction on Joe Brady being the official hire. Even though that's who we suspected, you had mentioned Daboll a little bit, but I think I was of the opinion if Daboll hasn't been signed already, then I don't think he's going to be there in Now the dust has settled.
Why did they fire Sean McDermott in the first place? If the result is Joe Brady getting hired as head coach, which good for him, but why did the Pegulas fire him in the first place? This makes absolutely no sense. It doesn't change the team whatsoever. If anything, it makes the team worse because now you're rolling the dice on a guy who's never had any head coaching experience, and your quarterback is in his physical prime, and now there's a question mark on who is leading the organization. Now, this could all work out, and Josh and Joe Brady could be a really good combination, and the offense could flourish, and all of this. We've seen Joe Brady do this with LSU and Joe Burrow. That's really where he became a household name, but that's college. He did have that stint, I believe, in Carolina. So he's got some NFL coaching experience on the offensive side of the ball. It could work out. And I know Joe Brady is friends with Josh Allen. They went on Pat McAfee. It seems to be a good relationship, a good working relationship. However, from the Bills' perspective, organizationally, this just doesn't make any sense. It feels like a self-inflicted wound, and I think Sean McDermott maybe had run its course. And I'm open to the possibility that is true, and maybe they did need to move on. But the way this was conducted in terms of his firing and then who they subsequently hired is completely embarrassing. And it's reminding people of why the Bills didn't make the playoffs for like 20-plus years. And I know the Pegulas didn't own the Bills at that point in time where in the drought. And to credit them, they put the pieces in place or helped put the pieces in place for them to get over the hump and now be perennial contenders. But now that they are perennial contenders, they're showing the difference between them and other franchises who are continually in the mix, like, say, the Rams or the Seahawks. These teams clearly have a different track record than the Bills because they would never do something like this, in my opinion. They're not – you can't fire one of the best coaches in the league and then replace him with an unproven asset when your best asset on the field needs weapons, needs things around him. He doesn't need the earth shaking beneath him. I mean, it just feels like such an incompetent move for what? Like, why? It feels like to summarize, it feels like they made a change just to make a change, and that's not why that rationale is not why you make this change at this point in time, from my perspective.
If you look at it from a fan perspective, no matter what you wanted the outcome following this postseason to be, in terms of who do you want as your head coach, everybody is disappointed by the selection process, and I'll tell you why. So let's just say if you're in the group of Bills fans that wanted Sean McDermott fired, you get the news he's fired. Yes, we can bring somebody new into the organization, give Josh some more life, get him some help, and what do? They hire the offensive coordinator. And then if you're in the other camp where you wanted Sean McDermott to stay, then he got let go, and you're just like, so we fired the head coach, one of the most successful head coaches in terms of, let's say, regular season for sure. But even ultimately, I'm like, he doesn't have a bad playoff track record. He just hasn't gotten to the finish line, or he hasn't even been able to line up for the race to be at the finish line. But regardless, I cannot understand how any organization can fire a head coach and then just promote a guy that was already on staff. And I'm like, well, this head coaching, this coaching staff was the problem, so we're going to hire within it. That makes no sense, even from the owner's mouth, from the GM's mouth, that we're talking about Keon Cole. Oh, that was a coaching decision. They brought him in. I'm like, Joe Brady was on the staff, so are you also blaming him for making this decision that, hey, the head coach is not calling the NFL to be like, hey, we want this guy. Ultimately, the GM and the owner are the final people that make the decision on the draft. Your coach can say they want this, and you can be like, hey, buddy, I'm not doing that. I'm the one calling the shots here, and the only people that could do that in the past 10 years was Bill Belichick because he was GM and coach. And not only that is that you have this team that's kind of in this weird space. I talked about it last week where the defense is aging, but the offense is young, and Josh Allen is in his prime. This is Joe Brady's first time as a head coach. He has no previous head coaching experience. And to be quite frank, in terms of how long has he been with the Bills organization? Since 2002. So it's not like he's been buddy-buddy with Pagula and being it with their GM. It's a move that, quite frankly, I don't understand. And this is when you had mentioned last week that it's like Pagula basically made the decision on the firing because the vibes were off in the locker room after a loss. And I'm like, no shit. What kind of vibes are you looking for after another crushing playoff loss? And I understand you can make the argument, and I was kind of in the camp of it's time for Sean McDermott to just go. It's time for a decision to split up, just a reset. I don't understand the reset if you're just bringing back a guy that you already know, pros and cons, to stay in the building. It makes absolutely zero sense. The only thing I can think of is that either Joe Brady had some type of connection with the GM or the owner where maybe he was able to, duck his head in the sand with some of the, let's just say, back and forth going on with their front office and McDermott, or Josh Allen was just so upset that they're like, all right, we screwed the pooch. We just got to get a guy in here and trust. Joe, you could stay. Yeah, he likes you. So this is one of those where, like you said, the Bills have a long history of incompetence when you're talking about the franchise as a whole. Spurts of greatness that never got to the finish line multiple times in history. And this is the first crack in a while where we've gotten to see, oh yeah, we're thinking about the Bills as this solid, great, fundamentally sound organization. And they just did an idiotic move that you would think, that you would see from the Jets, that you would see from the Giants or the Bengals or the Cardinals or the Titans or whatever. Pick your team. You're like, oh, this was kind of a reminder that, hey, they've been on a different trajectory because of some of the drafts that they have had. And all of a sudden the curtains have been pulled back and you're like, oh, okay, they are showing signs of some dysfunction that we would attribute with some other franchises.
This may be a bad take, but I'm going to make it anyway. And I'm going to relate this to the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm not a big Zach Taylor guy. He has a losing record through, 6-7 years of being with the Bengals. It almost makes me feel like Mike Brown and the front office's decision in Cincinnati to not get rid of Zach Taylor, this hiring decision makes that seem like honestly a good move, because I don't know if I would trust them to hire a good enough coach and replace Zach Taylor, even though I think Zach Taylor is completely mediocre. He obviously has a good working relationship with Joe Burrow, and Joe Burrow probably vouched for him. And they're like, we're a couple injuries away, or we just fixed the defense and we're this away. But if this is how the Bills, who were a better franchise and more well ran, and they've had never made a Super Bowl, but they had playoff success and more recent playoff success, I would not trust the front office to fire Zach Taylor and then hire a good enough coach in his wake. Because if this is what the Buffalo Bills are doing, to me it's like, what would, the Bengals would make a similar type of move. And so why not just bring in the stable force, and your floor, the floor is going to be 7-8 wins, even when they're banged up, even when they're injured. And again, I am not a Zach Taylor sycophant. I am not a Zach Taylor, I do think they need to move on, but this is what kind of happens. And now the Bills are in question mark land right now, and it could work out, and maybe we're just being hyperbolic or overreacting, but it almost makes Mike Brown look smart in that the stable move may have been the best move, because maybe with the Bills situation, if you still have Sean McDermott, you're still probably going to get 10, 11 wins. Now the Patriots are better. They're kind of threatening in the division a little bit. The Giants have a new situation. They're going to get some level of stability with John Harbaugh. The tides are rising in that division. The Jets are still an embarrassment, so you don't got to worry about them. But you could look up in a year or two, and the Bills may be limping into the wild card game with a 9-8 record with Joe Brady at head coach, because the Giants, I'm sorry. Oh my God. The Patriots and the the Dolphins. Who knows with the Dolphins? But they do have a threat in that division now with New England. New England was a pushover for a few years. You could see the tides raising in that division, and I relate it to the Bengals because I see in their division where all three of the head coaches got let go, and there's a vacuum there, and Zach Taylor is the only one who remained. And we don't obviously think he's a great coach, but maybe the stability, there's something to say for that. And I'm going to parlay this into our – do you want to respond to that, or do you want to parlay this into –
I'll make a quick point for you. So I want you to name me – just take guesses. The 4 longest current tenured NFL head coaches in the NFL.
So
can you name them?
Tomlin
you don't have to do
is
order.
Gone, and Harbaugh is gone. Let's see here. Sean McVay.
He's one of them. He is number 2.
Sean McVay's number 2. I'm a little hungover, folks. Just FYI.
And if you're like, hey, tap out, that's I can give you the rest of the answers.
I'm gonna actually try. Shanahan in San Francisco.
No.
Really?
Mm-mm. Well, he
surprised.
might be
Andy
tied
Reid.
with the bond. Andy Reid's number 1.
And then we have, oh gosh.
So one of them has been in the hot seat this offseason, but he got a contract extension. I'll give you the hint for that one, and the other one you've already talked about.
Shane Steichen?
No.
No.
It's Matt LaFleur.
Oh, yeah.
With the Packers.
I
that. Kid you not, it's the Bengals head coach.
Yeah.
He is tied for the 3rd longest head coaching current tenure. And listen, I could go off on about a 15, 20-minute rant here. I really don't want to. I would agree that I would not trust the Bengals organization to fire Zach Taylor and competently bring in somebody else. I would also like to say, probably to our friends group, that they probably think I am the biggest Bengals hater, who has no right to be. Kind of am.
I just want to raise my hand really quick. I am not a Bengals hater. I would like to see them do good, but yeah.
I want to see them do success. In terms of, especially where I'm at right now with Carolinas and the amount of different, Falcons fans, Panthers fans, I get Jaguars fans, I get to see a whole lot of different fan bases. I have not met a more consistent, delusionally fan base than the Bengals. I'm sorry, it drives me insane. And Zach Taylor being the 3rd longest tenured head coach in the current NFL is a problem. And when I bring this up, I kid you not, and you've read this because you were in this chat, what is the first thing that somebody responds with? Well, he took him to a Super Bowl. And I'm like, yeah, he did. And you also, this is the same organization that hired Marvin Lewis for 16 years without a playoff win. So by that standard, Zach Taylor's going to be your head coach for probably at least 30 years if you're just basing this off of success. There is going to be a time, and I guarantee you it's going to be in the next 2 years, where if the Bengals do not make a deep run, which I think they're always capable of, but if you had to ask me to bet money, I would say no. Zach Taylor and potentially Duke Tobin will be moved out of those situations. I would say 2 to 3 years max. Now, I swear to God, if they make it to the playoffs and if they get one win, if they were to finish somehow like, let's say, 8-9, and they make it in because the division's a little off and funky, and they win one game, extend the timeline another 3 years because that's this Bengals organization. Okay? I'm not talking anything bad about the team specifically. I like a lot of the players on there. This is one of those organizations that I honestly feel like as long as they'll fill the seats, they are happy with where they're at. So, that's the end of my 3-minute tirade instead of a 15-minute one. So I'll give it back to you to get us back on track, or if you want to dive further into it.
Let me just make a comment on that. So I think the time to actually get rid of Zach Taylor was probably like 2 seasons ago or at the end of last season.
Absolutely.
They missed the window, and now they're kind of stuck with it. And due to the shifting grounds in the NFL coaching landscape, I would argue that because they did not make that decision in the current day, it's arguably better to have Zach Taylor in some level of stability than to get rid of him and then trust the front office to fill that vacancy, judging off how some of these other franchises have hired going forward. Now, if they get rid of Zach Taylor and they hired maybe the Jaguars offensive coordinator, Grant Udinski, who seems to be a very hot coaching candidate, or maybe they brought in a Mike McDaniel, who I think would probably get along with Joe Burrow, maybe is not ready to go be a head coach again, but somebody that's young and exciting and is an offensive guy, I don't think they need a defensive head coach. I'm going to say that right now. I don't think they need a defensive head coach. I think their defense is bad, but I do not think they need a defensive head coach. I think the Bengals' identity is through their offense, and that's how they need to keep Joe Burrow engaged. But my point is in saying that, yeah, they screwed the pooch a while ago, and you're right. If they get in and they win one playoff game, you need to extend the time horizon. It's clear that Mike Brown really likes Zach Taylor. And I think that the Bengals, there's like stability, and then there's just incompetent, like doing the same thing over. Complacency. And I don't think the Bengals are necessarily complacent. I think they're trying, when Joe Burrow gets hurt, I think they're trying to keep this thing together. And some of the moves they've made have not worked out. And a lot of those moves have manifested because they have a small scouting department, and it's a lot of self-inflicted wound stuff, signing the wrong guys or not building, the right offensive line or picking poor in the draft. All of those are self-inflicted wounds. You can't be perfect every single time, and I know a lot of their success hinges kind of on being perfect, because now when you pay your quarterback that kind of money, and I'm not saying this is bad. This has nothing to do with Joe Burrow, really. But when you pay your quarterback that kind of money and then your wide receivers, you're not going to have a lot of money left over to, fill in the gaps correctly. And that's why you see, guess who the two quarterbacks who are in the Super Bowl this year are? Journeyman Sam Darnold and rookie contract Drake May. Pay Joe Burrow Stadium, whatever. Great. You got them locked down. They had to do that. But you know why Tom Brady won so many Super Bowls? Is because he took a pay cut. And the Bengals, I'm not saying Joe Burrow needed to take a pay cut, but they are in a situation that maybe Zach Taylor, as lukewarm as he is kind of a glue to all of this. And I think Joe Burrow still believes in them, although I think that's waning. That's waning. And he's got to stay on the field. He has to stay on the field. I don't want to get in that rant again. I've already had this. But that was kind of my take, is that, because they missed that window, it almost benefited them to not get rid of him in a way, because at least they have some kind of floor. With the Ravens and the Steelers and the Browns, you really don't know. It's kind of unexpected. Like, I think Baltimore will be good again because I think Minter's a good coach. I think the Steelers will probably be more of the same, and then I think the Browns are going to be terrible. I mean, like genuinely terrible, and that's where I'm gonna. Let's jump into Cleveland. I need to excoriate them a little bit. So Logan, Todd Monken, head coach, hired for the Cleveland Browns after passing an IQ test and writing 10 essays. Your reaction?
I think people from Baltimore are happy. We know a Ravens fan or two, and Todd Monken was on a wanted list. Let's just say dead or alive for many Baltimore Ravens fans. In terms of the hire, I think it's one of those. They got a guy that has just in general experience, loads of experience. He's been with the organization before. He was an offensive coordinator in 2019 for him. He's been all the way back in 1989. He was a graduate assistant. He knows ball. He's been around the block. And let's be honest, Cleveland. It's Cleveland, on the same level with Las Vegas and Arizona of lowest tier possible of coaching, destinations for this season. The Browns were going to have to hire somebody. We knew this. Is this an exciting hire if you're a Browns fan? No. Is this guy, and I'm not going to sit here and say I'm well versed on Todd Monken. I got his career pulled up. He's definitely been around the league, between college and, professional teams, whether it's Jacksonville, Tampa Bay, Cleveland, Baltimore, Georgia, LSU. He's got a lot of experience. But I feel like this is just going to be the head coach that is here until they're able to get rid of Deshaun Watson. Like, it's going to be like, all right, as soon as Deshaun Watson's contract is breathable, we're going to cut his ass. We're going to get rid of Todd Monken. Maybe at that point they get tired of the GM being there too and, giving out SATs for their head coaches to fill out. And maybe that's the reset for them. Am I inspired by this? No. This Cleveland defense is actually really nice. They have some good talent on the defensive side. They do have pieces on offense. The only problem is, even though you have a first-time Pro Bowler as your quarterback, that first-time Pro Bowler would probably be outplayed by half of this quarterback's draft class as well, if I'm being honest, and this is not a strong draft class. And I'm the person, let me say this. I don't hate on Shedeur Sanders. I don't hate on the Sanders family. I want him to be successful, but holy shit, he's a bad quarterback. This is a guy that needs to sit and kind of learn and cook, and this isn't a year deal. This is a guy that's got to be he's got to learn for a while, just because this is my problem with, maybe this is an unpopular opinion because there's been guys on both sides of it. Unless you are a physical specimen coming from a smaller school, let's just say like a Josh Allen, where he comes out and they're like, this dude is kind of a dog shit at quarterback, but he's 6'5", 240 pounds. Let's see what we got. And a guy that, with Shedeur, he's playing in Colorado, who I will sit here and say, like, it's the Big 12. It has some solid competition, but that was just backyard football bullshit. And to be quite frank, like, I kind of question a little bit of his father's ability to coach, and I'm just wondering, like, how much of this was just from talent that he's been pulling in, with his son and with Travis Hunter and whatnot. I guess we'll find out in the next couple years. How good is he an actually recruiter, and how good is he actually at coaching? But regardless, the Browns' biggest problem is at quarterback, and let's be honest, wide receivers, and in my entire opinion, this is not going to get fixed in one draft. They have this contract looming over them, and the Browns organization will not be free until this contract is over, and quite frankly, until Jimmy Haslam is 6 feet underneath the ground. So, I'm sorry, Browns fans. Todd Monken will be uninspiring. And he will lead you to being at the bottom of the division for 2 to 3 years in a row before getting fired. That's where I'm at.
I think the Browns are embarrassing. This is just absolutely sad, and it really doesn't have anything to do with Todd Monken. Similar to the Bills, only arguably more egregious. They've shot themselves in the foot once again. They have a horrible, horrible coaching situation. The Deshaun Watson contract looms over their heads like a guillotine during the French Revolution. I mean, this is truly one of the worst situations, arguably in NFL history, and I feel bad for everybody on their defense who has to go out there day in and day out and work their butts off just to have a Instagram quarterback turn the ball over 3 times and lose them the game. I mean, they have half the football team out there, and I don't. Todd, this is white bread and butter. This is lukewarm milk. This is nothing to me. This is cold oatmeal. Nothing. I mean, Todd Monken, I'm sure, is a really good guy, and I think he's probably going to be a solid coach, and there's going to be some level of floor there. But I think the Browns situation transcends what he's going to be able to do in that locker room, and I think it's a really uninspiring hire, and I could see that locker room, unfortunately, turning on him, not because of him as a guy, but just the totality of everything. I think that situation could flip instantly and turn really toxic really quickly. I don't understand why they put these hurdles in the way of their coaching process. They could have easily gotten someone else like Nate Shearhouse, the guy from the Chargers, who interviewed with them and then pulled out. Mike McDaniel pulled out. I'm not saying you have to hire Mike McDaniel in order for me to get on this podcast and say this is a great hire. But this was the last guy. This is like hiring the 10th guy on your list. That's bad, okay? The Bills didn't have a plan because they made a decision on a whim. The Browns knew they were going to get rid of Stefanski probably before the last season even started. And this is how they ended up. Why not just run it back with Kevin Stefanski? I know why, because the situation was kind of untenable and they wanted to move on, et cetera, et cetera. This is just completely embarrassing. And I'm going to get on the Shedeur Sanders thing for a second because I don't dislike Shedeur Sanders as even a quarterback, really. Like, I don't think he's good enough to play at this moment in time in the NFL. Everybody deserves to get reps in. And actually, he played slightly better than I thought he was going to last season, even if it wasn't good overall. I thought it was going to be a travesty, personally. And he proved to me that through time and effort, and if he sticks with it and he keeps learning, and he kind of like he could end up being like a worse Geno Smith. I think maybe. I don't know. I don't know. But going into next season, he is not a good quarterback. The Pro Bowl thing is a complete joke. I mean, complete joke. I thought they were talking about this in the group chat about Shedeur Sanders making the Pro Bowl. I thought they were joke. Like, I literally thought, I'm like, there's no way. I looked it up and it was real. I couldn't believe it. Why even have the game? It's just, this is total embarrassment. It's like when Tyler Huntley made the Pro Bowl, even times 10, even worse. But anyway, Todd Monken may be able to get a little bit out of Shedeur Sanders because he's an offensive coordinator and he's probably going to run a system that benefits Shedeur's overall game. But with Shedeur at quarterback, this is just not going to lend itself to winning. And I just don't understand why the Browns are like this. I really, really don't get it, because the Browns over the past couple of years have made some decent decisions. Not the Deshaun Watson contract, but they've had little glimpses of like, man, Cleveland was in the playoffs and they could probably build on this, and then they just throw it in the toilet. And the Browns are kind of that team that could be a frisky upset team this past year. Like, oh, if the Browns catch you on the right day, like, they could beat you because of their defense and they didn't turn the ball over a whole bunch. But they have so many holes on their offense, and their defense is going to get disengaged. This is just an embarrassing hire, and Jimmy Haslam is one of the worst owners in pro sports history. I mean, this guy is a complete train wreck. complete train wreck. I would be rioting outside of his facilities every single day if I was a Browns fan. He has spit in your face routinely over and over and over and over again, and I know Browns fans are kind of used to it, but this is totally different from the Bengals. To me, to exit out my rant, because I think the Todd Monken hiring is whatever. Like, they're just going to be bad. But you have the Bengals incompetence with Mike Brown. The Bengals and the Browns are not – these are not the same franchises. I want everybody to hear this right now. The Bengals, for all of their faults and all their incompetence over the past 30 years, they are a significantly better franchise than the Browns. I'm talking like a tier above. A tier above. These Cleveland's organizational structure, these are dregs. These are bottom dwellers. This is a complete embarrassment. When Marvin Lewis was losing in the playoffs, he made the playoffs 7 times. They never won, but they made the playoffs 7 times. They were some of the best. Like 2015, the Bengals went 12-4. You know, Zach Taylor, we're sitting here being like, throwing our hands up like, oh, I don't know. He's very mid. Zach Taylor, they made the Super Bowl. They've won the division multiple times under Zach Taylor. And no, the Browns are not even sniffing what the Bengals have been doing over the past 20 years. And I think people think that these are franchises that are on the same level. And they're just not. They're just not. The Bengals could be way better. And honestly, so could the Browns. But I hate that comparison because the Bengals, again, keeping Zach Taylor is better than firing your coach and hiring the 10th guy on your list.
Yeah, you're 100% right. Cleveland Browns are at the absolute bottom tier in terms of NFL franchise, or let's just say Big Four franchises in the U.S. I agree with everything you said. You know, in terms of a team, an organization shooting itself in its foot, we've seen that multiple times, but usually it's like kind of repeated blows. It's like, oh, we tried to do this one thing, we did this one thing and one thing. I can't remember the last time I've seen a team, at least in the NFL, be like, we're going to make one singular move and set back our franchise for the next 5 years, and we're going to be stuck. We dug the biggest hole we can, we jumped down in it, and we forgot the rope or the ladder. It's like, all right, have fun. Good luck figuring that out. And you're 100% right, is that we all knew, fans, that Stefanski was going to be gone by the end of the year. We knew it. We knew it about, if you didn't know it, let's just say potentially by the beginning of the year, depending on how it play out, 3/4 of the way through the year, they were like, oh yeah, he's done. He's absolutely done. He looks dead on the sideline. If you watched a single Browns game, and if you did, I'm sorry. We've both seen Browns games. They're not exactly fun. And that's just on Red Zone where I'm like, Jesus Christ. Like, I get this off my screen. And they had all this time to prep or find a guy that they really wanted to coach and hire. And what do? They scare away half of the coaches that come in with, like, you got to do this, and then I got to know your blood type, and then you got to take a 23andMe, and then it's like, why the fuck am I doing this? This is a joke of an organization. And it's one of those things where I think Jimmy Haslam is like, maybe he's just been like, all right, I don't think he'll ever admit that he screwed it up that bad, but I think he's also like, we're going to do whatever the hell we're going to do. We're going to do all these different, almost like experiments, and just say, screw it, because the hole's too big and we got to wait. Because I can't cut this guy because I gave him a fully guaranteed contract. So your dead cap is the same no matter what every single year. Unless they built the contract specifically to change as the years went on. But I'm like, no matter what, whatever's given to you that year is what you pay. So this was supposed to be a Todd Monken segment, not a Brown segment, but you can't talk about a Cleveland head coach without talking about this organization. So it's one of those where I wish Todd Monken the best. I don't have any doubt in his football ability. Maybe some Ravens fans, but we'll honestly have to see what the difference was in his play calling versus when it was influenced by Harbaugh in Baltimore, because I can specifically remember, and I know you know this as well, is that towards the end of the season it'd be like, oh, we're going to give Derrick Henry 12 carries in the first half, and then he doesn't step foot on the field in the second half. And I'm like, what's going on? Is he injured? Are we just not? What's the play here? And it's not like you're down by 21 points and you're just having to chuck the ball. It's like, no, you're still in the heart of this game, and you could make the argument your second best offensive player is not on the field. What is going on there? But we'll have to see. That's it. I think there's some pieces on offense you can be excited for. Like Harold Fannin was a nice surprise. They had the duo of rookie running backs. Now, I can't remember which one. Please remind me. But I know one of them got hurt at the end of the year.
Was it Quinshon Judkins and
Judkins.
Dylan Sampson?
Yeah, Dylan Sampson was – I thought he looked pretty nice for his first few games while they're trying to figure out the Judkins stuff. Judkins comes in. He looks hot, looks fresh. He's got an explosiveness that I haven't seen since pre-Nick Chubb injury days. And he kind of slows down at the end of the year, and then I believe he had a pretty horrific injury, like 2 weeks out from the final, which sucks. He's not going to be ready for the beginning of the year. And then in terms of, besides, let's say Harold Fannin, your best receiving option at that point is Jerry Jeudy. It's pretty damn awful, pretty damn uninspiring. So let's see what he can do. Because the defense is basically set. You are 100% right. You had mentioned how long is this defense going to have their heads in the game? Let's just say next year, is it just done? Or are they just going to self-implode on themselves because the spirit, the energy is just not there? Because it's like, hey, we've been backpacking this team for the past 5 years. Like, when do we get to, take a break on it? But then again, I'm also like, well, every one of these players had a chance to get out of the situation, Myles Garrett. And what did you do? You took the money. So I don't really have a lot of sympathy for any guys like that. I really don't.
I want everybody to notice this really quick. When Logan and I did the podcast about the worst American sports franchises, we did not talk about the Cleveland Browns because they were too obvious. We didn't want to spend time talking about the incompetence of the Cleveland Browns because it was so obvious and so uninteresting to research.
The Browns are like the front page of them, and the Jets are front page of basically just awful organizations in the NFL. I chose the Arizona Cardinals, if you listen to that episode, is because they're on the back page and they are just as bad. It's just that you don't see them in the news and they're in the Arizona market. Or if something does go bad, it never catches national media because they at least handle a lot more stuff in-house. Or they don't have the money, like the Jets or the Browns, to consistently shoot themselves in the foot. Where they do it to themselves, and they're like their lows are bad. It's just Arizona's low has been so bad for so long. And at least, historically, Cleveland has had success. It's just been before us or our parents have been alive for the most part. I think that's enough on the Browns. Now, we have two topics in particular that we had discussed bringing up, and I'll let you kind of diverge into one of them. We can play the GM game for our teams coming into this off season, or we can just dive into the Super Bowl, a preview, kind of do a discussion regarding that, and I'll let you pick which one you want to go down.
Let's talk Super Bowl first. I think that's fresh of mind. I think that'll be kind of fun to do because I think this Super Bowl doesn't have a lot of aura. I haven't heard as much excitement about this Super Bowl as maybe previous years.
Which is surprising because in terms of markets, these are some pretty big markets. Like the NFL was kind of like, okay, yeah, we got a true East Coast team, a West Coast team. We got the old villains, the old empire in New England, and then we have Seattle coming back. This is a 10-year grudge match in the making. It sounds like this should be bigger than what it is. And maybe part of it is just, I think there is a belief at least among the casual fan or the average fan, that Seattle just has looked so much more impressive on this run in terms of defense destroys the 49ers. They go step for step with the Rams. And then you've watched New England when basically they choked out the Texans and they got into a ugly weather, basically like a punching match, a boxing match with the Broncos. So I think Seattle has had far more inspiring wins, and I think you could say, well, New England beat the Texans. I should say they beat a decrepit Chargers who looked just like they didn't belong. They beat the Texans, who had a phenomenal defense, but we got to watch C.J. Stroud implode in real life. I got to see this man look scared on the camera from the sidelines. That was funny. And then we got to watch a neutered Denver Broncos without their quarterback. And there's no way you can tell me that, like, oh, if, whatever your opinion on Bo Nix is in there. I think the Broncos win that game. So I think that's part of the lack of hype around it. Now, I will say I do think this is going to be a fantastic game. I think some people don't realize, Seattle, I think a lot of people know that Seattle's good. Obviously, New England is good. But let's just talk the statistics of it. In terms of total offense, New England's number 2 and Seattle's number 3. Just in terms of pure yardage. And then on defense, Seattle's got the number 1. And then, of course, New England has beaten Houston, has beaten Denver, who is the number 2 and number 3 defense in the NFL. Then New England holds the number 4 spot on defense. That is where I think the media does a really bad job because they try to focus on it's the quarterbacks. And these are not super inspiring quarterbacks. I think the redemption arc for Sam Darnold is actually a fantastic story. It's just the fact that Sam Darnold is not a household name, and it's tough to sell the aura behind him. This isn't a Tom Brady. This isn't Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and it's not the same level. And then you've got Drake May, who's had a fantastic, one of the best second years that you can have as an NFL player. This is like dreamlike. But he doesn't make a lot of news in the media either. 2 relatively quiet quarterbacks, 2 teams that I know a lot of people, nobody expected New England to be in a Super Bowl, but I don't think even Seattle expected. They're like, oh, we'll be in contention maybe, depending on Darnold. They didn't think they'd get to a Super Bowl, which is, at least for me and you, and I'm sure it is for other people, this is refreshing. This is not the typical culprits. The Chiefs are out of it. The Eagles are out of it. I'm like, okay, this is nice. I like this. This is the year of chaos. I think this game it's going to come down to defensive line versus offensive line. And I know I've said this about some games in the past. Both of these teams, I would not say have a top. They are not strong-suited on offensive line. They're good, but they each have holes. They each have problems. And I could make the argument, like, oh, we already talked about they're both top 4 in defenses. New England has a stacked pass rush and a very good defensive line to stop the run. Seattle has a phenomenal ensemble of guys who can do both, and they are deep in the positions in the trenches. We're going to see which quarterback cracks under pressure first or the most, because in terms of, let's just say, fumbles, Drake May is one of the leading, I want to say he's top 3 in fumbles in the entire league for this season. Now, what I will point out is that in terms of turnover battle, New England does do a better job overall in not turning the ball over. The problem with Seattle's going to be is if Seattle starts having Sam Darnold specifically throwing interceptions, that's where they lose the turnover battle, is that they don't really fumble a whole lot. If Sam Darnold isn't playing super well, he's making mistakes, that's going to be a lot of pressure on the defense. This is going to be which offense falters first. It really is going to be, because these two defenses, that is the reason why each one of them are there. They each have their firepower. I think Seattle has a more explosive offense, but I think they're more at risk to make turnover mistakes, and that's specifically Sam Darnold. However, I could sit here and say the boom and pop plays don't exist for New England too often, which does not play well with Seattle's defense, who is completely fine with rushing multiple members, 5, 6 man, coming in on the quarterback, and they trust their defensive backs and their coverage linebackers to do the job and cover, because they've been doing that all year. They did that to the 49ers. That's why they beat them so bad, especially when George Kittle went out of the game. They're just like, hey, we're going to get Brock Purdy out of the pocket, and we don't care how long it's going to take to get him, because we're going to just super coverage. That's it. They are going to lock the guys down, and they're going to make you try to do something. So we'll see. I think this is going to be a really good game. I'm excited for it, but I don't think this is going to be like the Rams game. It's not going to be 38-35. I'm like, no, this is going to be a who breaks first type of game. I could see it being 13-10 at half, and then maybe the well starts to break open. I'd be shocked if any one of these teams puts more than 28 points on the board. I would be shocked. So I would say, hey, I don't know what the over-under is. I'm not going to give advice. I would have to look at the number. I would lean the under if it were me personally.
I want to say, put this on everybody's radar. So I think this is a little interesting, and this is not specifically to do with what's going to occur on the field, but this is actually the 10th unique rematch pairing in NFL history, which I think is fascinating. And of those 10, New England has been involved in 4 of them. So you all probably remember Patriots, Seahawks, back when I guess Logan and I were in high school. You had the Marshawn Lynch, he didn't get the carry at the goal line. Russell Wilson threw the interception to Malcolm Butler. You had their forgotten Jermaine Kearse catch. Great game, one of the best Super Bowls of all time. That was the last time these two teams matched up. Obviously, different situation now. You also had the Patriots and the Giants Super Bowls. Those were pretty legendary. You had the Patriots versus Rams Super Bowl, although one was in St. Louis, and then subsequently they moved to Los Angeles. The Rams did. They rematched. And then finally the Eagles and the Patriots, 2 also really good Super Bowls. So I'm excited for this other unique rematch. I just think that's a little fun tidbit of NFL history there. But as far as the game on the field, I'm really invested in the Sam Darnold redemption arc. I hate the Patriots. I hate everything they stand for. I hate Robert Kraft. I hate everything they're about. I went on a rant that I ultimately did not end up posting to TikTok earlier this week, in which I kind of take people through my mental process of why I hate the Patriots so much. And in fairness to Patriots fans, it's because they win a lot. They win a lot. And that's something that I really can't stand, because I was a Colts fan growing up, and they stood in the way of Peyton Manning winning more when I thought he was the best quarterback in the league at that point in time. Obviously, Tom Brady was a big foil to Peyton Manning growing up. But, they've had so much success, and when they fell off the wagon there at the end of the Belichick era, I really, really, really enjoyed it. And now, to me, it's completely unfair that they're back in the driver's seat to potentially win another Super Bowl when they barely even had to rebuild. And it's honestly nothing to do with Mike Vrabel or anybody really on the team or Drake May. I like Drake May. If this team was not wearing the New England Patriots uniform, I would not feel a way about it. But because Robert Kraft is in the owner's box and because they are in the New England Patriots jerseys, I just can't honestly root for them. I have to go Seahawks. And before I get back to Sam Darnold here in a second, I really thought Tom Brady, I hated him growing up because he always won so much. And when Tom Brady left New England, I gave myself kind of time to step back and think about it. And I was like, okay, do I hate the Patriots or do I hate Tom Brady? And I found myself rooting for Tom Brady and actually really liking Tom Brady. And now I would consider myself a fan of Tom Brady's. I rooted for the Buccaneers in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs, and I was genuinely happy for them when they won. And I was rooting for Tom Brady. And I realized then and there that it was always the Patriots. I hate the Patriots. And now is no different. So I'm going to go back to my Sam Darnold kind of thoughts, where to me that's the most intriguing storyline of the game. Yes, it would be really cool, I guess, to see the Patriots and Drake May win when Drake May's a second-year quarterback, even though people had been calling him Drake the Schedule May because they played such an easy, embarrassing schedule the entire year. And that's not their fault. You knock down the pins that are in front of you. But Seattle, to me, is battle-tested. They played in one of the toughest divisions in the NFL, and they actually beat really good teams. My fraternity brother, Mike McDonald, Siget brother, I'm going to be rooting for him as well. But Sam Darnold has been maligned for his entire career because he got Jet stink on him early in his career, and he saw ghosts, and the Jets ruined this man, and he went into football purgatory and rebuilt himself from scratch and turned himself into a quarterback that we all, I think, thought he could be. I never gave up on Sam Darnold. I never sold that stock. Now, I didn't have a podcast maybe I wasn't in the group chats like banging the Sam Darnold drum, but I think I always believed in Sam Darnold being a good quarterback, and I was honestly so surprised it didn't quite work out, because I remember the first time I ever got invested in Sam Darnold being a good quarterback in the NFL was that Rose Bowl game, USC Penn State, and Sam had some crazy throws in that game. It was super entertaining. They ended up winning the game, and from there I was bought in. I was like, this guy is an NFL quarterback. I would be shocked if he's not good in the NFL. And then it didn't quite work out because he went to New York and they wasted his talent. And then he, like I said, went to football purgatory. Now he's back. He had the redemption year with the Vikings. They stupidly did not re-sign him because they committed to J.J. McCarthy, who threw 16 passes in his college football career. And now here Sam is with his own team, some coaching staff that believed in him. He got the opportunity to play on an up-and-coming team with good infrastructure, and look how it worked out. And I think the Seattle Seahawks are going to take home this trophy, not just because of my Patriots bias, but also because I just think they're more battle-tested. Beating the Rams is a lot more impressive to me than beating the wounded Broncos. And honestly, and let's just keep it 100 here, if Bo Nix doesn't get hurt, I think we have another Super Bowl rematch, Seahawks-Broncos. I don't think New England wins that AFC Championship game if Bo Nix isn't hurt, because I don't think Sean Payton has to play hero ball the entire game. And the weather kind of impacted some things. I just believe that New England has never really looked that good this entire playoff run, and here they are in the Super Bowl. They beat an imploded Texans team who, CJ Stroud, I mean, dude, I could play quarterback better than CJ Stroud right now. And so could you. And I probably can't throw the football farther than 30 yards. I mean, they needed a old Phillip Rivers out there to look good. But, roundabout, I'm just kind of ranting. I'm really excited to see the Super Bowl because it feels like a football guy Super Bowl. It's not Taylor Swift and the Chiefs and the 49ers or the Eagles and their fans. And this is getting back to basics here. Good coaching, solid quarterbacks, teams with good defenses. It's going to be fun to see.
Yeah, this is – I agree with 100% most of your takes on here. So let's say – I think the best story, once again, is Sam Darnold, because if he were to win the Super Bowl, this is like an instant, let's say, ESPN 30 for 30 doc at least. You have a guy that is highly projected. Also, if he were to win, shout out to Colin Cowherd. He was right. It just took him a very long time to get there, but he was right. But just the journey that he had, where he does struggle with the Jets, and they finally give up on him. He goes to Carolina. He played a short stint. This was him and Baker Mayfield in Carolina. I think some people forget about that. Also, at the time, just Carolina just did not have the situation. This is like the same time that they were getting rid of Christian McCaffrey and still trying to build this ensemble, this roster up to what it was today. He sits a year with the 49ers just to learn in their system. He goes to Minnesota, and I might have missed a team. I think he also went with the Rams, and he sat for a year. I might have missed that on that one. Fact check me, all that. But the
He went
point
to the
is
49ers.
Yeah, he was the 49ers. I'm getting my people mixed up. But my point is he's been with 5 different teams in his career so far. He goes to Minnesota. He has at least the first 15, 16 games of the year are just phenomenal. He's playing out of his mind. It looks like he's rejuvenated. And he just implodes those last 2 games. And because of those 2 games, that is the reason why he was no longer a Minnesota Viking. And they said, let's go give this McCarthy kid a shot. And he goes. It's just a great story, especially if he were to finish it off here with the Super Bowl win. Like, this is one of those, if you look back, it's not maybe to the same degree, but this is like in the Kurt Warner category where, like, this shouldn't have happened, but it did. It's this ultimate journeyman who rebuilt himself and never gave up, didn't quit, sat on the bench, waited for his shot, got chased out of town, came back to a new town where the fans were not on board. A lot of them wanted to keep Geno. And he shows up, and the Seahawks fans are the happiest that they've probably ever been since prime Russell Wilson. So in this Super Bowl, I am rooting for the Seahawks. Part of this is because my dad is a Seahawks fan. I am rooting for Sam Darnold. I like Kenneth Walker. JSN is a phenomenal player. And on the New England side, I never had that type of animosity towards New England like you've had. Now, you have a very great reason. It's like, hey, we had Peyton Manning. We had, the Sheriff with some of these defenses and some phenomenal Hall of Famers on both sides of the ball during that run. And he was the gatekeeper. The New England Patriots and Tom Brady were the gatekeeper. And for the most of that time frame, the Titans were dog shit. So I can't even be like jealous of New England because it's like we can't even get there 95% of the time. And this is where my animosity grew with the Colts because, the Sheriff comes in town and kicks your ass for multiple years in a row. And then Sheriff leaves, they're bad for a year. And then Andrew Luck comes in and just resumes the ass kicking every year. So I've always been a fan of those New England teams just because I, from the outset, didn't have that animosity towards Tom Brady. And yes, he had help. He had phenomenal defenses, great offensive weapons. But, man, it's to what it was this year, or let's say in this past handful of years, when it's like, oh, Kansas City is down by 43 seconds and they need 6 points, and everybody's still sitting at the edge of their seat because there's still a chance. That's the same exact thing Tom Brady had. I'm like, the game's not over. The game is not over till it hits, quadruple zeros on the clock. And it's, for me, this is kind of a torn one because I like Mike Vrabel a lot. I can honestly say in my lifetime, he's the best coach that the Tennessee Titans have ever had. And it was very apparent if you watched any games. I've never seen Bill Belichick get mad at as much as an opponent coach as he did at Mike Vrabel because Mike Vrabel was schooling his ass with some rule book stuff. That was a very fun playoff game, if you know what I'm talking about, where they ended Tom Brady's career with New England on a pick 6. Great game, great moment for us. But Mike Vrabel is a hell of a coach. And if you want to say maybe that's a hidden factor that none of us are talking about is Mike Vrabel might pull some shit out of the hat this week, this coming weekend that we don't see. That he's had some plays cooked up in the background, and maybe those are the backbreakers. Because his time in Tennessee, he would do this in spurts and whatnot, but there is a different code when it gets to the playoffs of what he is calling, what he is doing. This Super Bowl, I guarantee you this man has been locked in a room for 18 hours a day just deep diving because this dude is insane in a good way. If he wasn't a football coach, he'd be in an insane asylum. So you're 100% right. This is a guy's Super Bowl. This is the one. I think this will be kind of like a Super Bowl where, let's just say 10 years from now, and we're kind of looking back and seeing, who won this year? What was the score? Da-da-da. This will be like I forgot about it. But then you get this flood in of memories like, that was the Sam Darnold year, and Drake May just came out. He's his second year, and he was balling it. It's going to be one of those, I'm hoping, nostalgia moments for us years down the way. So I'm optimistic this is going to be a good Super Bowl. I just don't know if we're going to see. This is going to be spurts or fireworks. This is not going to be a 42-38 kind of situation. It's going to be good. I'm very excited. I am picking the Seahawks to win.
This is your favorite Super Bowl's favorite Super Bowl kind of thing.
Yes. No, it's going to be a great game. I'm so happy with the results of the. What's the word I'm looking for? I can't think, but just the change up this year and who the teams that were good at the top and the teams that fell off and will inevitably be back, I'm sure. But it was such a refreshing year that we just did not get the same narratives again, where we got to see some different teams and we got to see are these teams, some of these teams are going to be the new faces of the league for potentially the next 3 to 5 years, if not longer.
Yeah, and both of those franchises have head coaches in place and general managers that are very competent, very skilled, and are savvy. So you could see this success continuing on into the future, even if they're not at the highest echelon of the league as they were this year. Because to me, this year feels kind of like a transitory year in the NFL narrative arc. Your traditional powers, your Kansas City's imploded, Josh Allen and the Bills losing the playoffs. I hesitate to throw them in there, but the Bengals really weren't involved this year. The Eagles were bickering and struggling across the regular season. They were never really a threat. They were kind of a paper tiger. San Francisco, banged up typically. The Rams were in the mix. They were probably, in that category. But to have the Seahawks and the Patriots end up in this situation just kind of shows you how the traditional powers of the past 3, 4, 5 years kind of let up some ground. And honestly, there's a lot of – the Ravens, another one. There's a lot of question marks about those teams. And these teams were kind of unknown quantities coming into this season. They were kind of hipster teams. People were like, the Patriots could double their win total. I know you mentioned Cowherd earlier. He was one of those guys Patriots could double their win total, but I don't think anybody thought they'd be in the Super Bowl. And then I think people thought that Seattle was probably going to make the playoffs this year. We just weren't sure in what capacity, but I don't think anybody was penciling them into a Super Bowl run. So it's the league is in transition right now, and this Super Bowl will mark a point in history to see where we're at where we're at next year.
I want to make one side note just about the Seahawks, and this is potentially the scary thing, depending on if you're in their division or in the NFC as a whole, is that I might have mentioned earlier that the Titans are number 1 in cap space coming in this year. The Seahawks are number 2. They have some money to play around with to potentially extend some guys, keep the roster, or just hire a bunch of mercenaries for a year or two just to overstack this roster. This Seattle team is not going away. It's not. It's especially when this is, in terms of a lot of key positions, it's youthful. And they've built this team up for the past 3 to 4 years, whereas I'm looking at other teams in their division where the 49ers are still trying to restructure their roster a little bit because they've had to pay Brock Purdy, they paid Fred Warner, they paid Bosa. They're kind of still figuring out the pieces. Still a good team. And then the Rams are, as long as Stafford is there, they have a chance. But I don't know how many more years I can keep saying that. So, I mean, we even talked about, not us and the podcast, but we had concerns earlier this year of the health of Matthew Stafford with his back, if you remember those reports. He looked great, didn't have any problems with his back all year, but that dude's approaching Aaron Rodgers territory in terms of the age. So we'll see. And then the Arizona Cardinals are just going to Cardinal. But, yeah, my point I'm trying to make is Seattle's going to hang around for a while. And so is New England, too. These teams are not – this is not a flash in the pan kind of thing, not flash in the fire. They're building up right now. So get used to them if you hate them.
All right, so putting aside the Super Bowl conversation, let's move into another topic here. So we both have teams in different roster and organizational situations. The Titans just came off last year drafting Cam Ward as the number 1 overall pick. They struggled a little bit, but this offseason they got rid of Brian Callahan and they signed Robert Saleh in addition to Brian Daboll to lead essentially their coaching staff. Saleh head coach, Daboll OC. So they're in a upward trajectory, I would say, for their organization. My organization is in kind of a holding pattern as they have been. Carly Gordon-Ursay, our owner, has recommitted to Chris Ballard, our GM, and Shane Steichen, our head coach. 2 guys that I think are very good, but also their track record says they are a little bit mediocre as well. With that being said, we've decided to kind of play fun GM a little bit. And Logan, I'm going to toss it to you first because I think we both did this exercise a little bit differently. So I'm going to throw it to you. What are you looking at with the Titans this offseason?
Yeah, so I had just mentioned that, hey, we are the number 1 cap space. We have $99 million, and that is not considering anybody we could cut, anybody we could restructure, anything like that. So I could see that number growing. And it probably will, just on basis of some of the rumors and potential possibilities that I've been reading. So this is a potentially, like I said, I have the most positive feelings I've had about my team in quite some time because, hey, we got a quarterback, we got this new coaching staff, we have all this money, we have top picks. This is a great place to kind of launch the team into another level, into the stratosphere, or this is where we dig the hole even deeper. So me and Kenton discussed, let's play the GM game, especially since our teams are in 2 different spots right now. So, and we didn't really discuss how we want to do the setup. So I'm going to go from the top. We have all that money. In terms of free agents, who are we losing? I would say in terms of our biggest names, we signed a 1-year veteran deal with Kevin Zeitler, who played guard for us. He's getting up there. He's about 35 years old. I don't know if we're going to keep him back. I'm not upset if we do keep him. I'm not upset if we let him go. We have Arden Key, who's been a somewhat solid edge rusher for us. I'm not upset if he goes. We got Sebastian Joseph, longtime defensive tackle for us. I'm happy with keeping him because he's been solid. I wouldn't mind extending him, which would probably be around if I had to do a projection, let's say $9 to $10 million mark, for that's where he's at. It might be a little bit overpaid, but that's just potentially to keep him there. We got Johnny Hecker, our punter. I'd love to keep him. I don't $1.5, $2 million, something like that. Joey Sly, I'm indifferent. They can sign him. They can get another kicker. I don't care. I think Chig Okonkwo is kind of our more interesting candidate to keep or to let walk. I'm in the basically the thought process that we keep him. because I think he has shown some athletic ability that a lot of other tight ends can't do. It's just that in the past couple years, it's just been really weird offenses with Will Levis and the start of Cam Ward. I would extend him, and I think he'd probably be in the range market of $7 to $8 million there. I think another team would definitely reach out, but in terms of that list, I said $99 million. Let's just say between Chig and Sebastian Joseph, we spend $18 million to keep them both. Okay, so now we're down to, let's just say, $80 million there. Now, in terms of our needs, I put running back on the list because I don't know what's going to happen with Tony Pollard. I think there's a very good chance that he becomes a cap casualty and they potentially sign somebody or they draft somebody in the later rounds to replace him. The only problem is our running back room can't stay healthy whatsoever. So I'm not against the change, but it's not on my top of the priority list because just like the Raiders saw this year, you can have a fantastic running back, and if you don't have the O-line to open up holes and gaps for him, shit's not going to happen most of the time. In terms of other needs, interior offensive line, I already mentioned Kevin Zeitler. Our center that we paid a lot of money to from Denver, Cushenberry, has been pretty underwhelming so far. I think he's still too early in his contract to potentially cut as a cap casualty. That'll probably be in a year or two. Our corners, we have Jerry Sneed, but it's just after that, it's like Marcus Harris, Jalen Amar Davis, Darrell Baker Jr. I think we'll keep one of those guys, and we'll toss the other two. I don't know who yet. I've heard Marcus Harris has the lead. I'm not sure. It wouldn't help to get another wide receiver in our room as well. I really liked Ayumaner and Chamir Dike picks. They shown kind of hot spots for us this past year, but you can tell the Titans don't have a number one. And we're probably stuck with Calvin Ridley for another year. This is why you don't pay 28 to 29-year-olds 4-year contracts. Stupid. Dumb. And then in terms of, I said edge rush is probably one of our bigger needs, not because we're going to get rid of Simmons, who usually plays a little bit more inside anyway. It's just we need to get more pressure on the quarterback here, or we need to be able to seal the runs off the edge because our DBs, our corner situation is not going to be fixed in a year. I think it's easier to fix the D-line right now than it is the corners. We'll still contribute to it, want to fix it. But, in terms of some of the guys that are coming out in the draft, there are some phenomenal edge rushers coming out where we're sitting at. I'm going to skip the draft right now because the free agency comes before the draft. So let's just say I wanted to fill the spot. I'm going to go after one wide receiver. Okay? And it really just depends on what these teams do. If they keep both of these guys, we're just drafting one. Number one prospect on my board is Alec Pierce from Indianapolis. A phenomenal deep ball wide receiver who would be perfect for Cam Ward. He's going to get paid this year by somebody. I don't know if the Colts are going to keep him just because of the other weapons that they have with Josh Downs and Pittman. They just paid Pittman, I believe, last year or the year before. We'll see. But in terms of projections, they're looking at Alec Pierce getting, let's say 17 would be a low ball, up to $25 million, depending on how badly somebody wants him. I would be okay with low 20s for him. And I know that's a lot, but I think, and you've seen Alec Pierce play, dude's a phenomenal deep threat.
He's great.
We need that.
He's great.
We absolutely need that. And the problem is that just with their offense the past 2 years, he has not been able to show his ability as often because of the inconsistencies of, your famous draft pick, top 5 draft pick. And then just because Daniel Jones, that's just not his style, where he's doing a lot of deep ball, he's doing a lot of shorts game, he's doing a lot of stuff on his legs. And I think another guy would be interesting is Wan'Dale Robinson. He is basically the opposite. He's not a deep threat, but I think he is a very underrated playmaker. And he really showed out this year with Dart. However, I do see the Giants keeping him, but he's probably in the $15 to $20 million range. In terms of running back, I'm very interested to see what this team does in Carolina because Rico Dowdle is up on his contract. They signed a 1-year deal. They gave Chuba Hubbard a lot of money. They gave him a 3-year deal. He's still under contract for 2 more years. Do they let him walk? If they let him walk, I'm diving. I want the Titans to go and dive in. This is the point where I say, hey, cut Pollard, pick up Dowdle. Because I think Dowdle has showed more explosiveness. And he went on a phenomenal run for about a month and a half this year. I think he's going to go probably in that $5 to $8 million range. I'm fine with paying a running back that type of money for a 2 to 3 year contract. I think Rico's deserved it. This is where we need to make arguably the biggest dent, is working on our interior offensive line. And it really just depends on what these teams prioritize. I have 3 guys, and they're all in the same price range. Elijah Vera-Tucker from the Jets, Wyatt Teller from Cleveland, and Ed Ingram from Houston. These are all guys that are going to go on the market for about $9 to $14 million range. I want to replace Zeitler with one of these younger guys that are coming up. I say younger, these guys are around 24, 25, 26 years in age. I want to get a guard that's going to stay with us for the next 4 years, 3 to 4 years. Solidify that position. We have spent quite a few draft picks in the past couple of years filling out this offensive line. If we get one of these 3 guys, I'm ecstatic. I would make this move. In terms of corner, I would just get a vet. I would just fill in a spot, potentially draft a guy, kick it down the road. Maybe that's like a Rasul Douglas who's 31, 32, just fill in a spot for us, just playing. In terms of edge, I highly doubt Seattle's going to let Boye Mafe go. He's probably going to be around the $8, $9, $10 million range. I would pay him just for some extra depth there. My biggest, I'd say, person on this list, and this will be one of the bigger names in all of NFL free agency, is that the Green Bay salary, basically what it looks like right now, is awful. They're going to have to let some guys walk. They're going to have to make some tough decisions. I think one of the guys that they let walk is Quay Walker. He is a phenomenal linebacker. If he's on the market, even though I did not mention that as a positional need, that's one of those guys that you pay the money out to and you figure it out after. He is going to be a wrecker for any team that's able to put a bid on him. I'm going after him. He's in the $8 million range. I would pay him significantly more if he was available. This is a lot of what ifs. I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on this because half the people on this list could be re-signed and none of it can matter. I just picked some of the obvious ones where I think cap might hurt the team and they got to let somebody go. I think Alec Pierce is in that conversation. I think Quay Walker's in that conversation. I could see Ed Ingram, Houston offensive guard, also being in that situation. We'll see. This is a big what if with the free agency stuff. Like as of right now, Mike Evans is going to be a free agent. That dude is coming back or he's retiring. We don't know. In terms of the draft, and then I will shut up and hand the wheel over to Kenton. We have the 4th overall pick. We have 2 different directions we could go. Direction 1A, which is what I truly want, is if he's available, I want to take Reuben Bain Jr., defensive end for Miami. Dude's a monster. If you can get a guy that averaged double-digit sacks, I shouldn't say average, but he had double-digit sacks this past season, you do it. If he's not there, we're taking David Bailey, edge from Texas Tech, same category. These are the top 2 defensive end prospects in the entire class. These are monsters. These are behemoths. They are guys that should be a part of a franchise for a long time. If those 2 guys are gone, I'm not reaching for an edge. We're going to take a wide receiver. We're going to take either Carnell Tate from Ohio State or Jordan Tyson from Arizona State. So we're either getting a pass rusher or we're getting a new number 1 at the wide receiver position. Go ahead and get him in the offense. So basically, those are my 2 pathways. The next pick we have in the second round is 35th overall, which is only 3 picks in to the second round. If we go edge, we're going to take a wide receiver, whether that's Chris Bell from Louisville, whether that's Jeremy Bernard from Alabama. And if wide receiver gets taken, we're going to go to the edge route. We're going to take Akeem Messedir from Miami, Florida, or this is one of those guys that he's projected to go in the second round, but I think he's going to be a first-round talent, and I do think he will climb up the board. But if he's there, Anthony Hill Jr., who's the linebacker from Texas, is a monster. He's going to be one of those guys that I think he's going to be the second-best linebacker in this class. He is phenomenal. And then in terms of I'm not going all the way to 7 picks total. There's no way I'm doing that, because how the hell can I predict who we're going to take? In terms of the 68th overall pick, third-round pick, if we get a wide receiver, an edge, or anything in that order, I just want them to go corner. Just get somebody as a little bit more depth, whether that's Chandler Rivers from Duke, whether that's Dalen Everett from Georgia, just a guy to get in there to compete potentially for a starting job, whether that's the second guy on the outside or whatever it might be. Now, this is where my football nerdum comes into power, is during the off season, because I'm bored as shit. And what do? This is how I learn about all of these college prospects coming. I go into amateur GM mode, and I'm doing the research, I'm looking at the statistics, and I haven't done this past couple of years, but in the past, you can ask Kenton this, is that I have reached out to be like, hey guys, do you all want to do a mock draft for the NFL draft and put money on it, and whoever gets the most picks right gets to take the pool? And these guys are just doing it for fun, and I'm sitting there like doing the study and all that. I can gladly say I think the best draft I've ever had, I've got 12 picks right in one draft. And this is not including trades, it's just where the players go. So this is like my nerddom to keep my mind sane during the draft, or getting up to the draft process after the Super Bowl. So this is an exciting time for me to play GM, and I'm glad you all got to hear potentially something mentally unstable for me rant for at least 15 minutes about my team and how I would build it, as if I'm not sitting here with a gaming set in an office room.
So I took a little bit different approach than Logan. I just kind of highlighted a few, I think, pillar moves that the Colts should make this offseason. Coming into, or let me rewind a little bit. At the end of the season, I think the biggest moves that fans would have considered making would have been letting go Shane Steichen and letting go Chris Ballard. And Carly Gordon Ursay ultimately decided to keep both of them around because of the first half of the season and the success the team had before Daniel Jones got hurt and they ultimately imploded. So an 8-1 start resulted in an 8-9 season, one of the worst fall-offs of all time. However, I still think that it was largely to do with the quarterback. They were kind of completely kneecapped, but that's the excuses we make. Ultimately, the season did not end the way that it started, and it was ultimately a disappointment. The Colts find themselves in kind of a purgatory of sorts, in that there are genuinely good pieces on the roster that are conducive to winning. However, they have question marks at some of the most important positions out on the roster. So if they're going to hold over the coach and the GM, that means that there's going to be important moves to make, but there's going to be some tinkering also. No franchise-altering moves are going to happen. So the first move that the Colts should make, in my opinion, is re-signing Daniel Jones. This may seem like, why would you do that? What is the rationale behind that? I think that the Colts need to have some level of stability at quarterback. I don't think I'm under the illusion that the Colts are even going to make the playoffs next year. And if that's the situation, why would you re-sign Daniel Jones, or why would you even commit to the coach or the GM? That's the ownership's question, that's a question for the ownership, not me. I think Daniel Jones, at the very minimum, could be, if he's not ready to start the season, have some level of veteran mentorship toward a young quarterback like a Riley Leonard, who would not be the future. However, I think it would give some level of like coaching ability, some level of stability. I would roll back with Daniel Jones. I think he gets along well with everybody in the franchise, and the franchise ultimately feels like Jones gave them a good effort, and they'd like to see him rewarded even if he's coming back from injury. I would also trade Anthony Richardson. I'd get him out of the building. I think he's ultimately going to ask for a trade anyway. Now, if you don't trade Anthony Richardson, and Daniel Jones isn't ready to go to start the season, then you have a kind of quarterback battle between Anthony Richardson and Riley Leonard, who are two uninspiring kind of backup level QBs. I actually do kind of like Riley Leonard and think he could be maybe like a Gardner Minshew type of player, not for the Colts, but just in general for his career. I could see something like that happening. He was fun to watch when he was out there playing. But Anthony Richardson, to me, is a sunk cost now. He has been publicly slighted by the organization due to, Daniel Jones being named the starter, which was the right move. And a lot of people did not like that move. I personally did. And at that time, we did not have the podcast. Otherwise, I would have come on here and backed that claim up that I did think that was the right move at the time. I've never believed in Anthony Richardson. We've had this conversation before. I thought he was a terrible quarterback prospect, complete NBA-type projection on hype and talent over evaluation, these guys thinking about the finished product instead of all the work it would take to get this guy who had barely played quarterback in college or high school to the level he needed to be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. He's the ultimate project, and it didn't work out, and it never was working out, ever. Not a single time. I can't remember a single time where I watched Anthony Richardson play quarterback and think this guy is going to be an NFL quarterback for years to come. And that's just the situation we find ourselves in. Not like the Deshaun Watson trade, but drafting Anthony Richardson set our franchise back years and years and years. It's just the reality of the situation. So I would trade him, and if you keep him, you have a quarterback battle. But I would get him off the roster, get a 7th-round pick, something like that to kind of rebuild. Yeah, and I know I said Daniel Jones specifically. I think that's ultimately what they're going to do. But you could also maybe roll the dice on a Mac Jones maybe. Kind of a guy like that, a bridge quarterback. I think if Daniel Jones would have finished the season, the Colts probably would have either finished like 10. I would say they probably would have finished like 10-7 or 11-6, maybe an early round playoff exit, or they were a wild card team, or Jacksonville was really coming on, but it would have been a battle there at the end of the year. I think if that would have happened, Jones probably would have got a 3-year contract instead of him getting hurt. Quarterback room, that's kind of what I would do there. The next is they struggle to rush the passer, essentially. And right now, their 2 edge rushers are Latu and Kwity Paye. And Kwity Paye never really worked out. I would get rid of Kwity Paye. I'd probably cut him, let him walk, whatever, and go into the offseason looking to sign somebody like a Trey Hendrickson who is linked to the team. I think they're probably going to they're going to try to sign a veteran pass rusher like a Trey Hendrickson, maybe like a Joey Bosa, one of these kind of guys. It's not super inspiring, but again, the team is kind of in purgatory. I don't really know if I believe they're a playoff team next year with the way this roster is constructed, but I don't think they're a bad team because they do have a lot of talent in certain areas. I would focus on hiring signing a veteran pass rusher to the team. What complicates this is you would think they would target one in the draft, but because they did a midseason trade for Sauce Gardner and gave up 2 first-round draft picks this year's and next year's, they're locked into Sauce, which I'm fine with having Sauce Gardner. They made the move when Daniel Jones was still playing quarterback. It was a win-now move. We're trying to elevate this team. I think Sauce is slightly overrated, but again, I like having him on the team. He is a really good player. But with making that move, you have handicapped some of your future. And it was some bad luck that happened that Daniel Jones got hurt and their season ended the way it was, because now they don't have a first-round pick who you could hypothetically use to sign a good edge rusher in a class that seems to have some good edge rushing talent. You mentioned Reuben Bain. He's going to go early in the draft. You got Texas Tech's Jacob Bailey. Both of these guys are high-end pass rushers. Maybe not generational-type pass rushers that we typically see, like a Myles Garrett. Not typically. You don't typically see a Myles Garrett, but you know what I mean. Like, there's guys that are hyped. I don't think these guys are hyped like that, but they are going to be really, really, really solid NFL players at the very minimum, in my opinion.
Do you care if I'm going to give you a list of expected free agent defensive ends. I'm assuming you want to go defensive end and not outside linebacker.
That's hybrid. Another issue, but yeah, D end was kind of the one I highlighted for the segment.
So I'm going to give you the list. You tell me which name jumps out the most, because you have the cap space really to sign basically anybody that you want out of this list. You just might be broke after it, but I'm just going to give you the list. Trey Hendrickson, Khalil Mack, Hassan Reddick, Joey Bosa, Malcolm Kunze, Dermonte Jones, Joseph Asai, Arnold Ebiketie. You get my point. It kind of falls off a little bit after that. Boye Mafe, if Seattle doesn't sign him for whatever reason. Does any name, Odafe Away, any one of those names kind of jump out at you?
You know, a lot of them feel like past their prime edge rushers. You mentioned Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa. I mean, I wouldn't be upset if they signed either of them, but I'm going to reiterate my Trey Hendrickson take from earlier. I think that's a guy that they were targeting potentially before last offseason because of the Bengals contract situation. 1-year deal, Trey Hendrickson, maybe 2. You know, I don't know what kind of contract he's looking for, but I think that guy makes sense on Indianapolis. That's probably where I'm going with that. But to kind of jump back into it, they need a new edge rusher to go opposite Latu because he's been pretty solid so far. And DeForest Buckner also was on IR a lot of this year, so, you know, or for this year, whatever. He's going to, once he comes back, that's going to be a valuable piece. And then the last, you mentioned linebacker, by the way. Zaire Franklin, good season on paper, not a good season in practice. They're going to need another linebacker. I haven't dived too much into that specific position, although I do think it could be fun if they drafted the dude from Texas Tech in the second round. I think his name is Jacob Rodriguez, kind of a team leader type. I think they need a good tackler, but a dude who can also cover in space. That would be nice, but anyway, to take it back to my last kind of take here, Indianapolis needs another wide receiver. You brought up Alec Pierce earlier. So when I say that, it's like, hey, well, they already have some wide receivers. Josh Downs, I think, is a good player, and he needs more opportunities. I would be so inclined to actually try to re-sign Alec Pierce and cut or restructure the contract of Michael Pittman.
So the only thing, because I'm diving in, this might be Michael Pittman's last year on contract with the Colts. So you could cut him. It would only be $5 million in dead cap compared to the $29 million that you're paying him. So you would be saving a significant amount of money. I would not blame you for that. You also have the option with Josh Downs. You're paying him $4 million. You could cut him for $250,000 dead cap. It makes sense to the Michael Pittman move. I think, you got some options to decide on the wide receiver room. Who's staying and who's going. I agree with you. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, but you explained it. I think that's kind of where my head's at. And I said another wide receiver. I kind of meant to say they need to make a choice on one of their two wide receivers. I like Alec Pierce. He's a UC alum, your alma mater. He's really fun to watch. He's kind of been used solely as, a deep threat. And I think he could actually do some more athletically and route running wise, because Pittman kind of occupies that like mid route range. That's kind of you're not throwing up a deep ball to Michael Pittman. He's kind of that player that maybe blocks Alec Pierce from being able to take on more of that load. And I think he's capable of it, and I'd like to see what that looks like. So cutting Michael Pittman, you could even invest some of that money into, another linebacker or, whoever, end up paying a defensive end. You could also cut Kenny Moore, who's been banged up, and he's maybe on the back part of his career here, save some money in that area. You have Sauce coming back. I know Kenny Moore is a nickel. I think Chris Ballard's been pretty decent at finding talent in the defensive backfield. So to round it out, re-sign Daniel Jones, sign a guy like Trey Hendrickson or another veteran pass rusher to go opposite Latu, and then cut Michael Pittman, or at the very minimum, restructure his contract so then they can sign Alec Pierce to a longer deal. That's kind of where I'm at. But to go back to the beginning of the conversation really quick, I think this exercise for me becomes less interesting when I think that what could have been this offseason is a complete demolition of where we're at. And I think having a holdover like Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen, who, again, I don't blame Shane Steichen for any of this. You can put more blame on Chris Ballard, whatever. I still think they're both very solid. I like Shane as a coach, even if he's not a perfect decision maker all the time. But because they chose to run it back, we're kind of in a weird position. And if it doesn't work out this year, we could be having the same conversation the same time next year where I'm like, hey, we completely blew it up. Now there's a lot more directions I could go with some of these opinions.
Yeah, you are. And part of that running it back, I just think, is because, hey, your owner died. It's a big change in management, and she wants to kind of let it set course. Now, I'm in the same boat as you where I don't think this is necessarily Steichen's fault. I think he needs a little bit more leeway. I don't understand how in hell your GM is still there. I do not get it. He's been there a long time, and you could poke a lot of holes into his drafting and free agent resume. He's not awful, but he's not inspiring either. Whenever I think the Colts are having success, I don't think it's because of him, and I don't think I will ever think it's because of him. You do make some really good points about I got your cap hit pulled up for the entire team here for this year and dead caps. The Michael Pittman cut makes a lot of sense. I think you could go either direction with Kenny Moore or Charvarius Ward on your cut. That one's kind of an up to you decision. I'd imagine you want to keep Cameron Bynum. He's been pretty solid. You're going to keep Quentin Nelson. You're going to keep Buckner. You're going to keep Bernard Raymond. And then I'm just kind of looking at some names coming up that I'm like, Sauce Gardner's going to eventually need to get paid. You got some years with Tyler Warren. Josh Downs is going to have to get paid. You've already mentioned, we both have mentioned, just basically this whole wide receiver room has to get paid. Pittman makes the most sense to cut. And I do think Pierce and Downs would be a really interesting duo to roll with. I think that could be very successful, actually. I hope your GM fucks that up, though, and we can somehow get Alec Pierce, because I agree. I think he's surprisingly athletic, and I think he can do it all. And I think he has the potential to be like a true, 1B kind of role, where he's kind of like, maybe this is me long. I see the vision of him being in the same realm of like a T. Higgins, where it's like, hey, this guy's talented enough to beat you downfield, to beat you across the middle. He is a very good route runner for his size. He's very quick for his size as well. I think this is just a guy that's been limited, and I mentioned, by the offense the past couple years. And I think and I'm not saying Tennessee's the spot to do it, but let's just say if you put him on the Bills, I think he's the number one wide receiver right away. I think there's so many teams he would walk into, and he'd be the number one guy in the room. hands down. And I could say that honestly probably for at least a third of the league. That's how much I believe in Alec Pierce. I just think he's been in the probably top 5 bottom type of passing situations that you would want to be in terms of trying to do a breakout, or because I think he has the talent to be being paid more than Michael Pittman. He just hasn't had the opportunity. So I'm saying like hey, if they were to let him go, he's at the top of my bucket list because I think his contract is going to be cheaper no matter how much you potentially overpay your market value, because he hasn't reached his peak and he's still got room to grow. And I think if he gets away from the Colts, I think he has a higher chance to do it. We'll see.
Yeah, I think he could definitely test the open market and see what kind of returns he'll get for his contract, because I think a lot of teams view him that way. For the Colts, you would be re-signing a guy who's been integral to the locker room and who has exceeded expectations. He's kind of been like Alec Pierce, before this year was kind of like an in-house secret. He was just, people know who Michael Pittman was, but Pierce was a guy that was surprising people and you really had to pay attention to. And I think this year the Colts kind of focused on hey, let's get the ball to Alec more. Let's just get Pittman, he's a little bit limited. And I think Alec could do just as much as Pittman could, even, we just need to get him more opportunities. And I think that really resulted this year. I want to go back to Chris Ballard really quick, because you kind of answered that, why we hadn't got rid of him. Unfortunately for Colts fans, Jim Irsay passed away, and Carly Gordon Irsay, his daughter, took over the CEO operation or the CEO role. And that because of that situation, we needed somebody, at least I think the rationale from the organization was they needed somebody to have a familiarity with Carly and keep everything on an even playing field, have some level of stability during a franchise transition. With the Irsay part of this, not Carly, but Jim Irsay, is he was really committed to Chris Ballard. He really trusted Chris Ballard. And that's why he got a longer leash during the Jim Irsay years, especially toward the end. I think those two worked well together, and Jim really appreciated Chris Ballard, but once he passed away, Carly needed somebody she could lean on, and Chris Ballard was already in that chair. That she didn't want to be overwhelmed by that. She wanted to keep the organization stable. So that's really kind of put us in this catch-22 situation. Now, I do believe that if Chris does not do well this offseason and that Steichen doesn't perform up to expectations, and yes, the deck is stacked against him because of the quarterback room and everything kind of surrounding the positional battle and Daniel Jones' injury, then you're going to get a situation where the house is cleaned and Carly is going to, put her own imprint on the franchise. But that's kind of the situation we find ourselves in. I think ultimately, to project out a little bit, I think the Colts are going to end up blowing it up. I think we're going to go 7-10, maybe 6-11. I think the injury of Daniel Jones's Achilles tendon is a little bit more, not saying I know the severity of his injuries. I just think it's going to be tough for him to come back from that and play to the same level that he was early last year, even if the way Shane Steichen was calling the offense was not putting him in a lot of positions to mess up. He was making all the throws. He was being very efficient. He was very much playing within himself. And I think that's to Daniel Jones' credit, because that's where he could excel at quarterback, not freelancing and doing all this stuff, but really being a surgical, executioner of the offense. That's really where he would, butter his bread. I think the quarterback battle is going to be too much to overcome. I think we blow it up next offseason, and then when we have this type of talk next offseason, it's going to be a lot of interesting. And I do think the Titans, honestly, to bring it back to your team, because I think we talked about the Colts a lot, and it's not a very interesting situation, but to kind of round out the podcast and go back to the Titans, I think that Tennessee could threaten to make a wild card spot next year. I do like Jacksonville a lot, and I think that Houston, even with their quarterback questions, and I do think C.J. Stroud is going to remain a question, and I actually think Cam Ward ends up being better than him next year. I do think I really like D'Amico Ryans, and their defense is really, really good. I think he's one of the best coaches in the NFL, and that has to be respected when you're laying this kind of out. He has built a tremendous defense from scratch, and you have to tip his cap to him. And they would probably be in the AFC Championship. They would have been in the AFC Championship game if it wasn't for his quarterback pooping his pants. But with all that being said, with those caveats out there, I do think Tennessee is going to take a pretty they're not going to be like the Patriots or anything like that, but I do think they're going to take a leap forward, and a lot of that is going to be on the development of Cam Ward, but also the floor is going to raise on their defense. That's kind of where I'm at right now with y'all.
And you kind of took the words, out of my. You read my mind with what I was going to say. Is that there was a team last year that was in the same boat that had struggled with a first-year quarterback and got a new head coach and also had the number one cap space, and now they're in the Super Bowl. I am not expecting that whatsoever. That is, I would be insane to think, like, if it happened to them, it can happen to us. Anything is possible. Like, no. Come on, I'm more grounded than that. But if we do it right, we are set up to make a substantial jump to where we are not the doormat of the division. I'm excited. That's why I brought up this segment for you, because I wanted to talk about the Titans' positioning right now going forward. And if they do all of these right moves, and it's not going to happen all in 1 year, but they can jump from being the number 4th overall pick to being in the conversation till the end of the season about getting into the playoffs. That's where I want it. That's my, and I like your expectation there. Is like, hey, I'm not expecting to go to the divisional round. I'm not trying to set myself up for failure. But do I think if we do things right, can we go above 500? Yeah, I think we can. And that sounds like I still have a low ceiling. I'm a pessimist by nature. I've seen this team hurt me too many times. But this is an exciting culmination. We've already talked about the coaches. We talked about the money, who they could bring in, who they're going to keep, who they could potentially keep, all of these things. And it's just nothing but good vibes. I don't have to worry about where my draft pick went because I traded for a corner and my quarterback's leg exploded, and I'm sorry. I got to watch Philip Rivers play football this year. I'm content. I do think you're right about your team, though. I think whatever the outcome is this year, which is looking more negative than positive, will determine who's going to be in the driver's seat the following year. Because this team has some really good young talent. This team also has some really good old talent. You're kind of at a crossroads here, just in terms of the money and the age that I'm looking at. And I think this is where some teams, I think, do a bad job of assessing what their division looks like and where everybody's at, where it's like, hey, we can keep fighting, and we're lucky to get to the middle pack while we're watching, let's say, our rivals, Jacksonville and Houston, continue to ascend because of the way that they've built their teams. And for us, the only way we can go is up, you would think. And then the Colts, they set it up to win it this year, and it's like you popped all 4 tires on the car, not just one. I love watching the Colts suffer, but this is a different kind of pain where it's just like, I don't know, it's like a deer on the side of the road that's not dead, and you're just like, oh man, like shit. What are we supposed to do with it? Like, it's not even like, oh, it's a collapse. It's like, God, they just fell apart, and this is ugly.
It is ugly. And this is my final kind of thought on the Colts situation, and this is the way I was thinking about it heading into this offseason and last offseason, or later on last offseason, is that there were a lot of fans who wanted to move on from Chris and Shane last offseason. And I was not of that mind because I felt like Shane had done enough to put the Colts in a position to succeed with a different quarterback at the helm. And a lot of people didn't think that quarterback could be Daniel Jones, which is why there was so much pushback when that happened. I'll get all of my flowers for being out on Anthony Richardson immediately. I mean, I wanted to believe in him because we were invested in it. I already kind of talked about that, but I knew that they were winning some games in spite of Anthony Richardson, and he did a decent enough coaching job to keep them around 500 to be able to have a chance last offseason to win some games because of the defensive competency, and he changed the quarterback. I thought he could scheme it up. Lo and behold, they go 8-1. So last offseason, I was kind of on the opposite end of everybody wanted to blow it up and just move on. And I was like, I think there's something here. I think there's a little more here. Now, like you were saying, we popped all 4 tires on the road. We completely imploded. We finished with a 45-year-old quarterback at the end of the season. I'm of the opposite mind now. I understand why the decision was made to keep Chris. Again, I'm more on the Shane train than the Chris train at this point in time, and I like Shane. And if it doesn't work out in Indianapolis, I do think he's going to be a head coach again someday and be a very good one, if that. Or that somebody's going to get a great offensive coordinator the following year. But I think that the decision to run it back was more of a managerial, organizational, like franchise current needs decision rather than a football decision. And those two didn't quite line up because of the situation surrounding the ownership. So I understand all that, and I understand why they're doing it. And I don't even think it's wrong, but I do believe they need to blow it up at the end of next season if it doesn't work out and it's trending toward not working out, at least from my perspective. So I was of two minds. I didn't want to go too hard into it last year or before this past season because I thought there was some more there, that there was there, and then it wasn't there. And now I think it's time for a change, but I get why they've decided to not make a change.
Yeah, it's anytime you have any type of company have its figurehead, the CEO has to step down or passes away or whatever it might be. Change is coming. Sometimes it just doesn't happen right away because of the stability. And that's something that, honestly, until our conversation, I had not given much thought of until me and you were just talking now. And I'm like, as soon as I said that out loud, I'm like, yeah, that makes perfect sense on why nobody was fired or let go. Because you had somebody, and I can't say what her knowledge of football and football operations were before she took over, but I guarantee you, no matter if you were the sidekick and now you're the main hero, there's still some things that you're going to have to learn about. So I do think, in hindsight, even though the fans may have wanted to change, I think some people may have not understood the circumstances within the building, and it makes sense just to keep the waters as level as possible and then figure out that process maybe a year or two down the road. So it'll be interesting. You never know. We'll have to see what Daniel Jones' recovery looks like. I'm in agreement that I think if you sign him, you give him, another year or two contract and say, hey, depending on the timetable, there's a good chance he could be ready week 1 based on the time frame. Is he going to be the same guy? Probably not, but you got enough on offense to give him support between Jonathan Taylor, your receiving core, Tyler Warren. You just might have to be a little bit more creative. But I would say go all in again this year, do what you can, and if you can't figure it out and you just don't think it is, I agree. Maybe it's time to blow it up. But, we got two different basically perspectives on our teams and what the potential future could look like. Nobody likes to see their team kind of on the teetering point and unsteady. My team was there about 4 years ago. So I understand where it was like, oh, here Derrick Henry's gone, Ryan Tannehill's gone, we're watching all these big defensive guys get let go, and I'm like, Logan Ryan, and it was just like, all right, cool. It's the end of an era. God knows how long it's going to take. And it's been basically 3 to 4 years since I've been able to be like, all right, I can breathe the air again. This is nice. So if it does happen, hopefully it's a shorter window for you. For you, not for the Colts, but I'll give you more respect in that organization. So
Yes, and I appreciate that. And the last thing I'll say about one quick point on Carly is I think this season she really, really was focused on absorbing as much as she can. But prior to that, I think she had been prepping for this for a little while, not specifically for her father's death, but taking over the reins of the organization. I think she's super sharp, super competent, and she is a good leader. You see, one thing you notice, you'll see it on TV as well and maybe on social media, but once you're in the building watching the Colts live, you see her on the sidelines, and it's kind of like you're wondering, I'm like, is she micromanaging? She never goes over to anybody. She never talks to anybody. She's just kind of looming there. And it seems like she's really trying to make her presence felt, not in a negative way, but to be like, hey, I'm here, I'm actively invested in this. But also, I think she is trying to absorb as much information as she can. And, we go back to the organizational status point, but that's why. And I think she knows that this is a tenuous situation at best. So I want to give her flowers because she proved to be a good owner this season.
Oh, absolutely. I think as she continues to learn more in the coming years going ahead, I think this could be, you're going to have a more stable owner. You're going to have somebody that's heavily invested and will have a great amount of football knowledge. So you already have a better owner in terms of mindset than the Titans do, and probably half of the leagues in the NFL. So I think you could have had a way worse transition. It sucks that Jim Irsay died. It's not we never knew the extent of his bad health, but I don't think it caught anybody off guard. Maybe with how, let's say, I don't want to say quick or just kind of out of the blue it became, but he's done a lot for the NFL. He's had a lot of personal factors involved with this as well, but I think Colts fans should be excited about their owner. It could be the potential for a really good foundation in the coming years. If this year were not to work out and you do have to do a reset, sometimes it's better to do that than to hang on. And we talked about that last week with a few teams. Sometimes you got to know when to restart.
Yes, I totally agree, and I think that's probably coming. But to round it out, y'all, I hope you like this podcast. I know I said I was going to try to clip some stuff up. Got really busy this past week, and honestly, the weather's been crazy too here, not just in South Carolina. So don't forget to give us a like and subscribe. We're trucking along. I know we've been talking a lot of football, but don't worry, we will get some other types of content out. We're starting to the Super Bowl is next week, and then once that's over, I think we're going to be planning some different types of shows for you guys. So anyway, stay tuned for that. But go ahead and like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Logan, do you have anything else?
No. Thank you, everybody, for listening and watching, and we appreciate you. Have a wonderful rest of your day and a good weekend. Stay warm if you're in the snow, and we look forward to talking again, meeting, and sharing our stuff next weekend.
Have a good one, y'all.